Hi and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today, no matter what it is you're doing. For the free wire tutorial here today, I'd like to share a super easy, beginner-friendly project. We're going to be working with just one length of 1 gauge of wire, and we're going to make a couple of different variations of a heart-inspired wrap-around ring. Now these are super fun to make, they're very inexpensive, and it's a lovely gift to be able to give and receive, or if you want to, you can obviously sell them. Let's head down to the board and have a closer look at the projects we're going to make together today. So I've got a couple of different variations of this project today. You can have a heart with a lovely couple of swirls on the far side, or you can go for a double heart. I grew up watching reruns of a wonderful show called HART-to-HART with Robert Wagner and StefaniePowers, I want to say. It's been a little while. Loved that show. Anyway, heart-to-heart ring or wrap-around heart ring, whatever you want to think of it, whatever you want to call it. These are so much fun to make and really lovely, easy to wear too. They can be slightly adjusted for size once you've created them. But what we're going to do is make a medium size, English size Q, approximately a size 9 I think. We're going to make one of these to begin with, and then I'll show you the swirly variations afterwards. So let's just pop that in the corner for now. It's going to roll around obviously. So I have for you approximately 18 inches of 1mm or 18 gauge wire. The first thing that we're going to do is give that a really lovely smooth and warm through. It's very cold in the UK today. We've had an incredibly chilly week for us. We're not used to it, so we don't cope. That's nice and toasty warm, especially that central section, which is where we're going to start out. So this is in the middle of my 18-inch length of that beautifully soft raw copper wire. And I'm going to use my bent chain nose pliers to put a really good firm angle in there. Now I'm just going to close that up by hand to begin with, and then use my pliers to gently bring that together. Once I've put some circular shapes on either side of this deep V shape, what we're going to do is fine up that central section a little bit more with those bent chain nose pliers. But what I want to do is start off by sorting out the size of the first heart. So I'm going to use the bottom of my round nose pliers to rotate around that wire and just bring that to the top lobe of a heart. If you wanted it larger, of course, you could use your multi-step bail makers or another round form. I think I might just go slightly larger on this one so it's easier to see. So I'm going to use step number 4 on my multi-step bail makers. And once I've got that first side of the heart set, what I'm going to do is slightly sharpen up this central cleave at the top of the heart form. So I'm going to give that a pinch, like so, and then keep that nice and flat. I'm then going to desperately try to remember which number I used, I think it was number 4, and create an equal round form on the other side. So I'm going to just very gently make small movements around whatever round form I'm using, and then draw the tail of that heart over, so that you can get the idea of whether or not that's even. Well, you can see straight away it isn't. So we'll roll those pliers around until those two sides are a little bit more even. Always looks good upside down. There we go. So that's a little bit more even on either side. Once I've got the heart size and shape that I like the look of, I'm going to pinch that central section together. Now, if you go very firmly with this, you might find that one wire wants to twist and sit over the top of the other one. If that happens, you can rotate the whole design around and pinch down with your non-dominant hand whilst you're just making that nice and close in the centre there. Now, if you decide that that's in fact a little bit too large, I'll show you now how you can rotate those pliers around, or your bail makers, and make that slightly smaller if you change your mind. So I'm going to put the number 3 step in now and just rotate and pull the tail of wire across, and you'll find that really very quickly you can reduce the size at the top. Do make sure that you do that on both sides unless you are going for that asymmetric look. Just pull the wires across and you'll find that that's a little bit smaller really quite quickly. So let's put those bail makers out of the way now. And what I want to do is make sure that everything is nice and flat. So if you haven't already done so, you can give that a bit of a squish and a squeeze up at the top there. and then decide how you want your heart to sit. So that to me looks like a pretty reasonable heart shape. What I want to do now is choose the direction for my ring to wrap around. Now I'm right dominant, so I tend to make the wire swoosh off to the right hand side. Doesn't matter one little bit. Let me just lift that other wire out of the way. I'm going to support where the bottom of the heart is going to appear and pull that wire firmly across to the side. Just draw the other wire back into position, make sure I'm still happy with how that looks. I'm going to just rotate that upside down so it's easier for me to show you. And I'm going to pinch the second wire, the one that's still straight, just a little bit further away from me, so that when I draw the wire across, those two wires will now sit neatly side by side. So just make sure that you're happy with that. If you need to, you can make that little bend, that first bend, a little bit sharper. Let's just bring that back across. And you can just play around with that until it sits exactly how you want it to. The next thing I'm going to do is just warm these next couple of inches of wire together. And I want to keep those two wires side by side like train tracks where possible. And just get some lovely heat and warmth into that. What I do need to do, if I pop this down onto a straight line, this is how it's going to sit on the finger. So if you want your heart to go out at an angle, you can adjust the angle of the wires coming away. I want it to sit quite straight on the finger. So I've got those two wires coming away neatly along a straight line. So again, making sure that those are toasty warm. The more you work the wire now, the better, because when it hardens, it will harden to a greater degree than it was before you began. But I'm only going for the next couple of inches or so with those nice warming movements. So let's grab a ring mandrel now and start wrapping around. So let's say this is the size I want to go for. I'm going to push that heart form down onto the round form or my ring mandrel and just start rotating that mandrel around. It's easier for me to rotate the mandrel because it shows you exactly where the process goes. Now I've gone for a slightly longer length of wire today because it means that I can either have a single wrap around as we have now, or I can go again, and that will be a slightly stronger ring. If you are going for a second rotation around that mandrel, make sure that you're pushing your second set of train tracks side by side with the first set, because if you allow that to gap now, it will gap in wear, which is slightly more risky in terms of it catching on things or being slightly weakened. So we've wrapped twice around the finger there. Let's remove that mandrel now. I will bring that back in a moment to help me create the final shapes though. Give that last couple of inches of wire there a nice smooth through, because we're going to want it to work and behave nicely for us now. So we would, if we were with a client, just check that that is the correct size. So I'm approximately a size P, I suppose, just about an 8.5, something like that. That might be even smaller, I really don't know. So that's what I've gone for, 2 wraps around the finger, and I'm making sure that that heart sits centralised over my arthritic knuckle. And what we're going to do now is start bringing the tail wires up away in the opposite direction to the first heart. So I'm going to do the bottom one first, the one that's furthest away, and I'm going to grip that opposite where the base of the heart is on the upper side of the ring. So I'm going to bring that away quite strongly and sharply and make a nice firm angle. And I'm going to slide those pliers underneath and bring the second wire approximately equal and opposite. Now your heart doesn't have to be very symmetrical, it can be asymmetrical as you like it. I do like an asymmetrical heart actually, but what you need to do is just make sure that they're fairly centralised so that when they're being worn they sit neatly on the finger. So in order to create the design with the second heart, what we're going to do is trim just a little excess of wire away. Now if you have a ruler to hand, it makes sense to try and get these two lengths to be as similar as possible. I, as ever, am going to eyeball it, which means that my design is likely to be just slightly asymmetrical, but I'm not going to overly worry. You have the option to ensure that that's equal and opposite if you wish to. So now we're just going to make some little spirals and bring them back inwards on either side. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to start just a little way down from the tip of my round nose pliers. And once I've got that round shape started, it hasn't closed up, so what we're going to do is just push that back against the tail of the wire that attaches to the ring. Very, very slowly is how you make neat coils. So I'm just going to allow that to wrap around. until I've got a nice double coil, and I'm just going to adjust that so that it would sit flat on the finger, and then we'll do that second side. A little bit of heat and warmth will always help your cause. Starting just a little way down from those round nose pliers. You can start at the very tip if you want a completely closed coil. I quite like the aesthetic of a slightly open coil. Now, if that happens to you, the coil is sitting at an angle, very, very easy to just straighten that up. And again, if you want to have nice, neat coils, just go slowly. It's not a race, you don't have to get it done quickly. And you can just adjust those so that they sit equal and opposite, and you've got yourself a little bit of a heart ring. Now obviously you can make that much smaller for everyday wear, or you can even set beads into the lobes of the heart on the open side if you like, and on the side with the coils you could set teeny tiny beads if you wanted to. But endless ways that you can customise this, but I think it's a really cute little ring and it takes almost no time at all. If you want to, you can add a little bit of hardness with a nylon head hammer, or very, very gentle taps with a regular chasing hammer. But if you put enough intention when you're wrapping that wire around the centre of your heartfelt wrap ring, you should get a reasonably strong design anyway. So that's the basic heart-to-heart wraparound ring. If you'd like to see how to make the variation, let's head back down to the board and I'll take you from the section where we've just made the first heart and we've wrapped around, and I'll show you how to make those cool spirals instead. So with the second design type, with the heart wrap ring, I've got some spirals to add underneath. So you've got a choice really. You can do the heart-to-heart ring with a heart on both sides, or you can go for a heart on one side and some lovely swooshy spirals on the other side. Now for this design, it doesn't matter if your spirals are the same size or not. As it happens, the lower wire is slightly longer, which means I'll get a slightly larger spiral on this one. And then the upper wire, the one closest to the heart, is slightly shorter. Now you could, if you wanted to, just trim them so that the furthest one away is slightly shorter to get spirals that are of a similar size. So let's just trim this wire down slightly, probably about 1 centimetre, just under ½ an inch shorter, and that's where we'll start. Let's remove that mandrel. And we'll start with the shorter wire that's further away from the heart. Now please remember that you don't have to have spirals that are the same size, especially if you're short of wire at this stage. If you've made a very large shanked ring, you might not want to lose any of the wire that you have available to you. So let's just start that spiral in exactly the same way with those round nose pliers until we get a round form. I again have gone for a slightly open centre to those coils. And let's just start pushing that around in a circular form. Now with your spirals, as ever, the longer you take, the neater they will be. And if you struggle to keep the ring shank nice and round and solid, you can put the design back onto the mandrel whilst you're working this. Just makes it a little bit trickier to show you the spiralling. So what I tend to do is start with the spiral on the wire that's slightly furthest away. So that's made quite a large spiral, as you can see, and I'm just going to take that ever so slightly past the central line, so it's just slightly further around. And what this will enable us to do is to create a nice, warm, smooth swoosh on the other wire. So I've just started arcing that around so that it skirts around the outside of our first spiral. And again, I'm going to remove the mandrel at this point because it's just slightly easier for you to see the spiral being formed. So you don't have to have the same size centre aperture if you don't want to. You can go exactly how you wish to. So I've started by rotating those round nose pliers around until I have a circular form, and then switching to those flat facing, in this instance they're bent chain nose pliers. So let's scooch that all the way along, and the way to get yourself a nice neat coil is to press that into your non-dominant hand using very, very small motions. It's barely an eighth of a circle at a time, probably not even that. Now you can sit these however you want to. In one of my designs I've got the spirals going in 2 different directions. In this design I think I'll just bring it over the top slightly and just sit that in the same line. So if you didn't like how that looked, what you can do, you get to do this one time, is switch the direction of those spirals, bring that around. This, oops-a-daisy, this is something that is in fact easier to show you on the mandrel. because what we're looking to do is to keep those wires as close together as possible. So let's just give that a little bit of tension in that coil, and again, if you wanted to, you could absolutely apply a little light hammering over the surface on this one. So let's see which finger this will fit. Probably a little bit big for that one. There we go, it fits the same one. So that's gone to about a size P, O to P, something like that, about an 8. And that was from that 18-inch length of wire, the same as the one that we used for that heart-to-heart wraparound ring. Let's just put all these down for a second. And you can take a quick look at these before I love you and leave you. Fistful of rings there. Reminds me of being a teenager all over again. I hope you've enjoyed making those super easy, beginner-friendly, wrap-around heart ring projects with me today, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Have yourself a beautiful day. Bye for now.